debilitating for this country. Look, I'm one of those, and I won't make myself popular with everybody in other parts of the country, but Toronto is Canada's only global metropolis. And that's no offense to Vancouver and Montreal and Calgary, and they're all great cities, but we are a global metropolis. We are the economic engine of this country. And I would say for cities generally, including all the ones I mentioned and others, to have the restrictions, the shackles placed on us in terms of, and it isn't just about loading more taxes onto people, but it's about saying, look, we need the revenue to somehow end up where the responsibility for delivering the services is. And in big cities like the ones I mentioned, including Toronto, the building of transit, the addressing of affordable housing issues, and so on, are going to be done by the local government first and foremost in terms of at least the actual delivery of these things. And we don't have either the consistent financial support from the other governments or the taxing powers to do it ourselves. And that is frustrating, and it's debilitating for the country. Now, there's hope with this government in Ottawa that they've recognized the need for some kind of a partnership to, in effect, redistribute some of the money they can take in through tools we don't have, like income tax and an HST and so on. We'll see if that turns out to be a durable partnership. The signs are optimistic. And the signs are optimistic. And again, I will win no friends in other parts of the country, but that's not my job. They allocated the first tranche of transit money based on ridership, which to me was the sensible way to do it. You apply the money where it's needed the most. Now, that makes other cities unhappy because we have 550 million transit riders in Toronto annually. So that means we get more money. But I'd say, well, that only makes sense because we're the biggest city with the biggest transit system that's growing rapidly, and we need that money. But it's a problem. There has to be a recognition of the fact that, immigration policy is actually set in this country largely by the federal government. And I have no problem with it. And I have no problem with the fact we've been open about that because it's allowed our country to grow and to be the wonderful place that it is. But we then have these people come to Toronto where they need transit and they need job opportunities and they need housing. And they come here in tens of thousands every single year. And that financial inflexibility that we talked about is difficult for us to meet that challenge effectively. But I will just say that I think that it's a blessing for us because there are people coming here who have actually, if you look at the success of the Tamil community who I was with last week, or the Vietnamese refugees that came, and I believe will say the same in 20 years of the Syrian refugees, they have made great successes of themselves because they're entrepreneurs and they're hardworking people. But it's a challenge for us. And they come to the biggest city and will continue to come. There was an article this week somewhere that said, will we ever get away from letting people live wherever they want? Well, first of all, in this country, I don't think we ever will. And secondly, you can try, but they're going to come here because there's opportunity here, and we have to make sure there is, and because there are other people like them here. So if you're coming from another country, there's going to be, no matter where you're coming from, there's going to be at least 10,000 and maybe 100 or 300,000 people like you here, and they like being part of a community where your cultures and your traditions are respected at the same time as you become a Canadian. I just think, again, it's the reality of what Toronto is, and I just hope that decision makers at all levels of government, the sooner they sort of understand that completely, they will do it, not because I'm saying so because I'm trying to beg with my begging bowl, but because we want this to be Canada's champion. I'm a proud Canadian. And by the way, if that means we got to help Alberta right now because they've got problems, I'm all for that. I'm all for that. But it also means that other parts of the country, including the national government and other provinces and other cities that are resentful of Toronto, and I get that part, have to understand that the better we do, the better that the rest of the country will do, and vice versa. So when Alberta is hurting, Toronto's hurting. And so we should be helping in some way, and I hope we are. I think we are. Actually, it was the provincial finance minister here, Charles Sousa, who said he was open to it. I've never even gone that far because I sort of have said, I'm a step behind, and then I said, look, I would want to be satisfied this was effective in actually addressing the problem. And when I say the problem, this is a marketplace. And in Toronto, because of this growth we were discussing, a lot of the uplift in housing prices has been driven by the law of supply and demand. And I would think that in some respects, it's, provincial land use policies, for example, that are probably having as much impact as foreign buyers are, but I'm not sure. So that's why we're participating in the exercise begun by the finance minister to look at the two hot markets in the country, Vancouver and Toronto, and have an orderly, thoughtful, informed discussion about what will work. I am not interested in being a partner in things that are like show business, about sort of saying to people, oh, we did this and you can now feel better that housing prices are going to cool off. I think the real challenge isn't so much, yes, escalating housing prices are causing a challenge. The real challenge is affordable housing going forward for working people. Because if we get to the stage, like other cities you'd be familiar with, like London and so on, where the really wealthy people and the poorer people, because the government helps them, can live in that city, but nobody in between, that's a big problem for this city or any other. And so the affordable housing for working people, to me, is something that where we need to get the governments re-engaged. And the federal government is not yet engaged enough in that. They've shown signs of being slightly more engaged than previous governments, but that's a big problem. And I believe it's a serious economic problem. And increasingly business leaders agree with me that, you need those people who are in those jobs that are never going to be priced in terms of their income at a level that would allow them to afford to have a home in Toronto. Those people still need to live here because we need them to work here. So I think it's a very serious economic as well as a social issue. Well, I start by saying that I have learned in almost 2 years in this job that there's a lot more people around, it seems, that will find reasons to tell you can't do things than that you can. And I look at it and say, we built all these condo towers, and people who don't live here or see it on television, but probably the people who see it on TV know. We've had literally tens of thousands, now approaching into the hundreds of thousands of people live downtown. The good news is that's great for confidence in Toronto. It's great to keep the downtown alive. The bad news is the city did not insist before my time that when those towers were built, that we built parks to go with it, because people living in 500 square foot condominiums, they don't have a backyard. They don't have a front yard. They don't have a family room. So we need libraries to be the family room, and we need parks to give people a place to go with their kids and or by themselves. And so I'm making up for lost time. But again, people fail to mention when they say we can't afford it, that we've extracted money from all those developers who built all those condos, some of it for the express purpose of building parkland. And there it sits in some fund somewhere. I'm not even sure where. And it's not being used to build parks. So I'm saying, look, yes, that'll only pay for part of it. There's going to be some private sector interest that's already started to emerge on this. I will find a way to pay for it, because I don't believe we have the option of just saying, well, let's forget it. Let's have all those people living downtown, no, proper parks. This is the most park deficient area of one of the biggest cities, the third biggest city in North America. And I don't think that's an acceptable state of affairs in terms of the city being livable. We had 3 cities in the top 5 in the world as the most livable a week or 10 days ago. Ours, I can only speak for this one, won't stay that way if we just decide we're going to allow tower after tower after tower to be built, and we don't build the parks to go with it, and the transit for that matter. So my job is to find a way to pay for it and not be defeatist about this and say, oh, well, let's throw up our hands and just forget it.